difference is I can teach you better if I understand, like somebody who knows textiles, then I can take leather and put it in terms of textiles. You know, like not all fabrics are suitable for all applications, and leather kind of works that way too. So the more I can, if I can ask questions, then I can figure out how best to frame things.
I am not a textile person, so mine would be more leather related.
Okay, okay.
And I'm more of a textile person, and I don't know a lot of leather work. So
It's not that I don't know about textiles, it's just that's not,
right.
not my forte.
Like in general, if I did something that's gauze weight, that would not be suitable for a robust garment that's going to require a lot of wear. I mean, that translates pretty much everything. Something that would be good for a bridal veil, I wouldn't use to make a pair of pants out of. Well, leather's a lot like that, that there's certain things that, certain leathers that I wouldn't use for certain applications, period.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and make this live on Facebook so I can show Fianata how to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, we'll give a few more minutes. It's not, it's only a minute after. We'll give a few more start, really. What would you guys like to learn? Like, to what end are you wanting to learn things? Are you wanting to make a pair of shoes? Do you want to make like a messenger bag? We have like haversacks and stuff like that that are period. What are you going to make with what you're going to do? The more I know about that, I can tailor stuff to give you more things that will be useful to you.
I particularly am just looking for the basic knowledge of how to like fix the leather things I have, such as my armor, and I have a leather messenger bag, but I also want to dive into doing shoes at some point.
Okay.
And I've done some stuff. I've started getting into books and tooling leather covers, and I've done coronets and stuff, but I still lack a lot of times on the basic knowledge on weights on leather and which tools are good for which things sometimes and that kind of stuff. So
I find that a lot of like folks when they're starting out will pick the wrong, they pick the wrong leather, they pick the wrong, like leather comes from a beast. Like I would use bellies for certain things where I'll use shoulders for others. A belly leather, if you think about it, like a cow has 4 stomachs. If you're using cowhide, the belly leather stretches a whole lot because it expands and contracts as the cow eats. So there's a lot of stretch along that. If you make shoes and you don't take that into account, it's going to stretch in weird ways that you never figured for, and your shoes aren't going to fit right. I was, you know, if I was going to make my uppers, I would make them out of shoulder leather or something like that, where the weight of the belly actually pulls against that and it stretches it tight. And if you have a good pattern, it's going to stick to the pattern and stay that way, to having a lot of give, and it expands in funny ways. Because I know the first few pairs of shoes, I didn't take that into account when I was doing it. And my results, like I had a pretty decent pattern, but it's like I used elastic for the upper, so it stretches too much. And it becomes loose and it doesn't fit right.
Yeah, so I've made shoes, like a bag, Elizabethan gloves, but I guess I've always like basically followed instructions, and so I don't really know how to pick the right kind of leather to make a project, look at a project and be like, well, what would I need to make that? That makes sense.
Yes, I've tried some stuff, and what I would hope to do is pass along some things I've learned, like learn what I did wrong so you don't do that. Like I had never made that much out of, you know, you can tan a sheep, you can take the wool off of it just like you can any other, you know, bovine animal, and tan that. It really very poor leather. It's not, it doesn't have a lot of strength. It rips easy. It stretches a lot. it's just not good for a lot of applications. And to me, that's probably why you see a lot more sheepskins used as being padding and things like that, because they don't make very good leather. A lot of shoes were made out of goat skin. Like you go back to the 13th, 14th century, cordwainer is a person who makes shoes out of goat skin. Okay, then you get to the different things, like they had a lot of guild stuff. Well, I have to be a guild person who can make shoes from scratch. Now, then a cobbler was somebody who repairs them. They're not allowed to make new shoes by a lot of the way the guilds were. They weren't really taught, but you could patch it and stuff, and they use different things. So you get into some things like that. But see, I guess we're probably ready to start. Does anybody, so we're looking at shoes, we're looking at doing some bags. Anything else?
Well, just real quick, I just want to let everyone know in the class that you are being recorded. If you don't want to be recorded, turn off your video, change your name, or go to Facebook Live, because we're live on Facebook. That's it. Sorry.
Okay, I guess we'd start off, like, I just want to do real basic stuff, like what is leather? It's simply the tanned hide of an animal. We can use 4 or 5 different ways to get to that end result. And period, some of them are not, some of them can be used. Some of the modern ways are just as suitable for what we're doing and not. But I guess the base thing is you can tan stuff by different ways. You can do it chemically. You can basically, dehydration is a form of tanning. That's how you get rawhide. I've got some rawhide here, and it comes like this. It's really hard. That's what I would use for shield edging and stuff like that. It's not real thick. It's about 4 ounce. It's about a 1/16 of an inch thick. But it really has to be made, you have to get it wet to get it to work. That's the simplest way to tan stuff, is just to let it dry. You'd use a desiccant and dry it out, just dehydrate it like you would food. Another method is oil or fat curing. It's going to result in leather that will look kind of like this. It's got a lot of grain to it. It has a nice rich color. The more you use it and stuff, it'll wear, and it gets nice peaks and valleys, and it looks really nice. It generally has a little more waterproof than other types of leather. A modern version of that would be like Latigo, that you're using for saddle leather and stuff like that, because you don't want something that'll be like veg tan leather, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But as water and stuff goes into that, it hardens it and it continues the process. With oil tan stuff or fat tan, you're basically filling up all the cells inside the leather with that oil, fats, or combinations thereof, so water can't get in there, so it kind of waters it, and it prevents it from water hardening. Another method that we can use is, it's kind of like a preservative, and this is what you're going to see most today, is chrome tan stuff. Chrome tan has a very specific look to it, I think, whether it's that. I'm not going to show really well, but all of the, like, that's a real thin garment weight that I've salvaged from a vest or something like that. It has, like, veg tan leather has a flat, like a flat sheen to it, as if you're comparing it to paint. It's flat paint versus gloss or something like that. If it's chrome tan, you're using salts to tan the leather. And usually when they do that, they'll drum dye it and they'll finish it with some preservatives and things like that, but it gives a sheen to it. That's why usually when they'll say, like, I've got a wallet that I did here. And this I did in chrome tan leather, because that's what I had. Let me see if I can. So I liked how certain things turned out about it. That's the completely wrong leather for this project. It should have been done in something more like this, and it would have looked right, and it would have worked better, because I used something that was a little too thick for what I was doing. And it came out, so that ended up being a learning experience. Okay, I guess the last real method that we're going to talk about, I mean, there's some old hides, but that's kind of variants of chrome tanning. Veg tan. Okay, that's what's going to be the period means of tanning stuff. Even if you go into Tandy or your local leather store and you get veg tan leather, it's likely not tanned in the same method as it was done in the 12th, 13th, 14th century or further back. They would have done pit tanning. That can take 8 to 12 months to actually do it. I actually did some experiments with that, and I used different vats. It takes a long time to go through that. That's why leather, I know people think leather is not cheap today, but it would have been much more expensive in the medieval or Viking age because it took so long, it was so labor intensive, and nobody liked it. I mean, they did stuff in London and it smelled. I mean, London smelled really bad in the medieval period because of all the tanning pits that were outside of London. Does anybody have any questions so far? When we're doing veg tanning, I mean, you can take oak bark, which is about 11 tannin, I think is what it's got in it, and you can use bark and you can make a dye bath, and you're gradually going through one set and another set and different dye baths to do that. And some of them are designed to take the hair off, some of them are designed to tan it. Today they use sort of, it does the same thing, but it acts much more quickly. So you can get, instead of a year, you can get that done in a few weeks at most. For us, it's largely the same thing, but it is different. Somebody like this is done, this piece I got from France, so I know it was done pit tan. And it was about 4 times as expensive if I'd have got the same thing in the same way at Tandy, because it took somebody a long time. So I got some of this to do some shoes with and to make another version of that wallet that I just showed you. Okay. Did everybody download a handout so we're kind of going along the same thing? I should have asked that first, I suppose.
I didn't find it. I'm not sure where it was. I missed it somewhere.
Okay. Okay, let's go into different types of leather. And by types, let me kind of look at this. Like I'm talking about breeds of like sheep, goat, pig. This is pigskin here. In my opinion, it's not suited for much other than cosmetic things. It's used a lot for linings. I wouldn't use it anywhere where I'm doing anything that's structural. Like if I was going to make armor, like a coat of plates, and I wanted a leather covering, I would not use pigskin. It's cheap enough, but it tears. Like I can probably, you know, I'm old and I can pull through that and break that easily. You know, it'll tear. It's just not good for certain things. So no, if you're going to make a messenger bag out of it, that's fine. But you know, if you're not planning on carrying a whole bunch of stuff, but I wouldn't make armor out of it. I wouldn't make anything that's more than decorative or something like that for its function. I like deer hide. I think it's pretty. It's very soft. It's slightly flexible. So here's a pair of shoes that I'm working on. These are for my wife. Deerskin's much softer. It's very sort of velvety. It's very soft, smooth, has a nice color to it, but it'll stretch. It's got, I don't know if you can see this, let's see, but it'll give. So that's a characteristic that can work against you or it can work for you depending on how you use it. If I was going to make shoes out of deerskin, I'm going to make the pattern tighter because I know, think of it as like little house slippers, or I've got some dive shoes that are designed, they've got a rubber bottom to them, but they're designed to water with to be able to swim. So they need to be real form fitting. So the uppers are all like elasticy material and your foot fits in them, and then they kind of cup around and relax, and they hold on to your feet that way. So that's how I would make a pair of shoes that way. Like if I was to take this, I'm to the point to where I'm close to. So if you'll see, it'll come out like a zip, like this. That it's actually, and I can push out, and it'll fit real tight around that. So that's a way of me picking out what leather I wanted and knowing what the characteristics are to get a specific function. For, like, I probably wouldn't use that for a wallet though, because I don't want any of those same, they're not assets, I guess, but same characteristics for the wallet. I would want something that would be more like this. There is no stretch to this. This is cowhide. This is about 4 ounce, so it'll fold. It'll do that. If you're wanting to make a shoe that has no stretch to it, that's fine for that. In period, shoes would have been cowhide, goat skin, pretty much any leather that you can use. We don't have any exotics. There's no snake skin or anything like that used. You're going to use, like you were asking about armor. So if I'm going to use armor, I was making a coat of plates that I don't think is, I've got padding on underneath it. And if it's a real coat of plates that I'm going to use the way I would, I'd actually have a chainmail shirt underneath the coat of plates. So I'm not gamison where it's going to wick all the water straight to that leather. Then you might get by with using Veg Tan. But if I was going to do something and I'm not wearing a chainmail, I'm just going to have it over my gamison, and I know my gamison, if I'm fighting for 4 or 5 hours, it's going to get soaking wet, and it's going to inundate the leather with that liquid. Well, that's going to do bad things to Veg Tan. In that, like, you can take, if I was hardening for like balls, bends, or elbows or something like that, I can use hot water. Well, temperatures 98.6, maybe 100 degrees. With all that heat trapped in, and then you're putting sweat and you're putting salt, it's going to change. It's going to harden that Veg Tan. Water hardens it. Water and heat harden it into a shape. Well, I don't want it hardened. I want it to be supple, so maybe I shouldn't use Veg Tan for that particular thing. Like I would, in that particular instance, an oil tan, something like that. Like I've got some oil tan here. It's going to look more like this. I've used a little thicker, but since it's got oils and fats, some of it can be waxes that are inundated in that water into it, and it's not water hardened. So if you were making elbows out of it, it's never going to work right other than whatever layers. If I put 3 or 4 or 5 layers together, I might get enough thickness, but that's very supple and bendy. It's never going to be hard enough to make hard armor. Coat of plates, good, because I want something that's a supple covering. That there's a plate, all the armor stuff. I'm just using, because you see those in velvet too, coat of plates and stuff. I would use modern, we're talking about Latigo. That's the modern version, or one thing that people, like if you go to Tandy, what they would call oil tanned and stuff like that. They'll also use book, but that's kind of the project. Anybody have any questions so far?
There was one question in the chat. Would you be able to upload the link to the handout in the chat?
Let's see if I can. Can I attach a file in here?
I believe if you go in the chat in the bottom right corner, it says file.
Yeah. Okay, I'm on my computer. it doesn't look like it's going to let me. I can see if I can share the screen. I've got it saved on a flash drive, not actually on my computer, so it doesn't look like it's going to let me, but I uploaded it on the page, so if you can navigate there, you can just download it. I put it as a PDF. It's not gonna, it doesn't want to get to my flash drive to do it, it looks like. Yeah, because when I go to network to look at it, it just doesn't even show the drive at all. So sorry. We'll type in
So if you go to the Rum Community Facebook page, on the right, it's recent group files, and there's the Basics of Leather PDF uploaded Thursday. So maybe that you can get it that way.
yeah. They can download that. It doesn't look like it's going to let me. It won't let me go to anything outside of, like I would actually have to have it on this particular laptop to do that. Okay, let's continue on. Does everybody know what suede looks like? It'll be, I don't know if you can see this, it's kind of white in the middle. And it's kind of like the inside, like the very inside of leather, but it's that way on both sides. And suede, people call it different things. Some people call it splits. But what they've done is they've taken like the leather, if this is the outer edge where the hair would be on the cow, they split this little piece here, run it through machines, and they split it off. It's okay for things like, it used to be a big deal that they would make suede shoes or suede jackets. And it looks pretty. It doesn't work well with water. Like if you don't waterproof suede, it gets spots and stains on it from rain. That was a big thing about like when they had suede jackets and stuff. Waterproof the dickens out of them, then they would stain and they have problems. It doesn't have a lot of strength either. All the strength is from the upper layer, the flesh layer of the cowhide. I've never seen anybody do splits from most other, like pigskin. They're not thick enough for you to do splits out of that and have any thickness. I've never seen suede or anything like that out of that. But technically, I guess if you could get a thick enough hide, you could do it, because that's all it is the bottom layer split, and it's usually, I don't know, they'll keep it 2 ounce, 3 ounce, 4 ounce, something like that. And that kind of gets the idea that most of the strength, if I was making armor layers, like if you're going to do something 12 ounce or above, let's cover that since I'm using that as a term. An ounce in leather terms means that it's 1/64th of an inch thick. So 1 ounce leather is 1/64th of an inch thick. Get to 4 ounce leather, that's 4/64th. That's essentially a 1/16th of an inch thick. Is what you're looking at. So you can figure it out. Like most of the stuff, this is like 5 or 6 ounce. This is pretty thin. This is about 4 ounce, what I would use for uppers. Okay, this outer layer here, this is stuff I got for it's about 12 ounces thick. You can use, like I like to use, some people don't, but it's whatever you do. Like when you buy armor then stuff, you're going to get stuff from different parts of the cow, but I like to use the edge of the bellies for that. I think that makes pretty good. You can get some places like, I think Tandy, and if they get an armor bend leather, they run it, compress it more, so that, you know, it may have been 15 ounce when it started off, and they've compressed it a little bit. You still got the same weight and stuff. It's just that they compacted it a bit. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's look at some, so we know what an ounce is. That's how thick it is. Let's look at grades. Top grain, full grain. You got split leather, bonded leather. I guess that's the basics. Full leather is going to be kind of like this. I've got the outer flesh side to it. I've got a inside, which will look different. It kind of looks like suede on the inside, because that's really what it is. Some it doesn't look so different, like this pigskin. It's hard to tell which is one side versus the other. So what they've done in order to do that, most of the pigskin, they take all the suede layer and then they just get rid of it completely. It's not strong enough to make a layer of its own, but you're getting down to where it's just the top layer. Bonded leather, I'm trying to think of what you would see. Cheap furniture, like if you bought really, really cheap furniture where they've taken, and all they've done is they've taken suede and they put some sort of polymer and a coating that's on the outside to make it mimic the flesh side of leather. And it's not very strong. It's only going to be strong as suede, maybe a slight bit more. Got some bonded leather is actually, let's see if I can, okay. Does anybody ever use like solder furniture where they make it out of what I call chipboard? The chipboard tends to be big chips that they've glued. It's chips of wood glued together, pressed under weight, and they've made a like a panel out of it. Okay, then, well, you have versions of chipboard that are where we're not using chips, sawdust. Well, we take all the sawdust and you put glue and you mix it all up. You put it in a mold and you press it, and that's what most of press board, we call that press board. There's a leather version of that where they take all the little scraps and stuff and put it together, and you put some glue and things in it, and you do this, and they use flexible glue so it'll still bend some and stuff, but book covers may have that. If you see something and it looks, it's like, well, it's kind of leather, but it's funny. It has a funny look to it. And I guess it's okay for what you're using it for. There's nothing wrong. I'm glad they're recycling it, and you know that means that a good skin didn't go to that. But it's going to have some issues that are different from like veg tan leather or chrome or whatever. So certain things that wouldn't be, like I would never make armor out of it, never make anything that's structural out of it. It's probably not going to have a lot of stretch one way or the other. So that's pretty much it. Is there anything that I wasn't clear on or we didn't understand? No? No? Okay. Okay, let's something else like this particular already came. I don't know if I'm trying to get it where you can see the color. It's got a nice flat finish, but it's green. This had already been dyed green when I got it. I like this. They did this with the period dye, so it tends to not be glow in the dark. It's very subdued, very. That's not that you can't get some nice colors out of period dyes. You can, but they tend to be more expensive. This, on the other hand, I think I'm getting enough light that you can see that there's definitely a gloss, a sheen to this. So how they coated it. Some of it can be fine, the leather, and they put like a protective coating, sort of like if I was doing woodworking, I'm putting polyurethane on top. If I put polyurethane on top, I can get different types of polyurethane. Some's satin, some's gloss, some's flat. So there'll be anything from flat, you can't see it to let the finish through, or I want to make it really glossy. Leather does the same thing. They have stuff that you can take a nice veg tan leather and you can make it look real fake by putting a coating over it. Depends on what you want and whatever it is. There's nothing wrong. The coating just acts as a protectant. That's purely a personal choice. You're not going to see that on any period sort of stuff. They would have coated it if they were going to try to waterproof it. Probably going to be beeswax and maybe some animal fat, and that's what they're going to use. You might see people that use oils. You know, you can do that just like you would if you have like harness racing stuff, like horse stuff. It has to be oiled down. Like there's all kinds of things that you can get, and it just depends on what you want to go. I tend to use, if I was going to waterproof it, I would use mink oil. That doesn't mean that that's a better thing. It is a period, you know, that you can get it that comes from an animal, and you would have had people would have used probably seal or otter oil or something like that. We know that they did seal pants and stuff like that because they were waterproof. So they understood what waterproofing was and how to do it. Wool does its own thing without that. Okay. Let's go to, there is a system that the English use, which is called irons, which is similar to what we use as ounce. Nobody uses irons here. It's just a similar system. So if you see it done online, just know what it is, measuring that. You're probably, you know, I don't use irons enough that I'm going to go. I know kind of what they're doing, but it's a similar system. This is, let's see if I can get this close enough. Okay, this is just a picture of how the cow looks. Leather's going to cut that. They're going to go down the middle, we put it on a plane. If my hand was this, they're going to cut and just going to make it flat. You can buy stuff like you can buy shoulders, bends, bellies, or what's the common thing. So shoulders are just what you're thinking of. Here's the head of the cow. You get shoulders. You can get a single shoulder, which would be kind of from the back over on one side. Double shoulders is just both. You can get, which is the spine is down the middle. I can get a bend on one side. I can get the other. I can buy both. Depends on what you do. And if you buy a whole hide, you're going to get everything on there, stuff like that. Stuff that I was showing. This is a belly, which has been, you know, it's just this strip down here, this thicker. This is, I don't know, almost a quarter of an inch thick. I use it for shoes. A little, some people don't like to mess with it. Depends on what you're using it and how you like it and your preferences. Yeah, I guess something I should cover, if we're like leather, they will treat it. There's untreated leather, that's going to be the most expensive. If I were to get veg tan that's not been treated, and when I say by treated, like cows go through life, they get blemishes on their skin. It could be a lot of ranches. I know we did as a kid. We had barbed wire fences to keep the cows out of places they're not supposed to. Well, they're pretty tough. They can actually take a lot of damage on their hide without it really hurting them. I'm sure they feel it, but and they'll heal up. Well, that causes a blemish in the hide that you're going to get. Well, I can do one of two things if I was the processor to mitigate that. Finding hides that have very few marks on them, harder. Therefore, I'm going to charge more. Expensive. I can take and I can sand the grain down or treat the grain to get certain characteristics. I can dye it. Like I can dye it and sort of cover it up. That would be the equivalent to me. We were talking textiles earlier. If you had something that was a, let's say I have a white linen undershirt and I get a bad brown stain from my armor on it. use that for something else and I can't get the stain out, I can try to bleach it out and get it out, or I could cover it up. Like I could just dye the whole tunic, so like brown or something, if that's sufficient to cover it up. And then you wouldn't necessarily notice it. And I've also made it to where it's easier to not get a stain from armor in the future if that's what I'm going to use it for. Like every tunic that I wear under my armor, I make out of just natural colored linen as opposed to white linen. In period, they would have had to take it out and take the linen out and lay it out for days and days and days and weeks to bleach. They let the sun. So with leather, I have a couple options. I can dye it to where it's not as noticeable. I can sell it as a craft grade, so I sell it cheaper, or I can try to buy a better hide. So that's kind of the options that you have. Tandy has a, trying to think what they call it. It's like a sanded textured leather, and I got some to play around with it. I liked it pretty well. You can't really tell that much that it's like sanded, but like this, let me see if I can get this enough where you can tell it. Like right here, might be easier from the back. There's marks that are on this that are from, they had clips to tan it and they stretched the hide. It's got the clip marks there, and they've left an indentation since they had so much force to stretch it out. They've left an indentation there. So they kind of bond sand that down to get it that. So you're going to lose a little thickness, but like if I was processing the hide, what I would do is like say, okay, I know that I want to end up with 5-ounce leather. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it at 10 ounce. So that gives me some extra, sort of like if I was making something out of wood and I want it 5 inches and I've left it 7, so I know I can plane some stuff off. And that's essentially what I'm doing is on the top side, I'm planing some of the surface off and getting it down a little bit to where I'm getting kind of dents and scratches and stuff like that. Now, that won't work on everything. If it's a healed up scar from barbed wire, it's not going to fix it. Okay, what else would you guys like to talk about? I mean, we can go into, I kind of left a good amount of time for question and answer session. So whatever questions you guys got, I didn't want to cover, you mentioned tools and stuff like that. I'll answer what question I know, or I'll tell you I don't know if I don't know it. What kind of projects do you want to work on? What are you interested in? Just whatever.
What recommendations do you have about like buying leather online? Like trying to figure out like the quality or, yeah.
Okay, that's a good question. Okay, like I know the 2 places that I'm going to go to get leather. Where I'm at in Ohio, we're not too far from Mount Airy, which is Weaver Leather. That's where Weaver Leather's headquarters are run by Amish people. They will let me go if I want to drive up there. They'll let me go, and if I want to spend, because they know me there, they'll let me go through everything, and they'll, as long as I put stuff back where I got it, they'll let me pick all to my heart's content. That would be my preference thing. But now, having said, like I know people at that particular location, and they kind of have my trust. If I said, well, hey, I need this for and tell them what I'm going to use it for, and I need it much without any marks on it, I've never had them let me down. So I can give them a lot of latitude as long as I'm specific with what information. What I would look at is if somebody's not selling it, like you're getting craft grade prices, and craft grade is generally the lower grade. Like if I was going to get a craft grade deer skin from somebody that's on eBay, because there are sellers that sell on eBay, and they'll hold it up, and you can only look so close. I don't care how they magnify it. And some people are wanting to hide things and they don't want you to see what they're trying to get past. And it's going to be too much of a pain in the butt once you get it. Oh, that's not what I thought, to return it. You're going to, for some of the stuff like that, some of the deer hide and there, it costs almost as much in postage to have it sent to you and then turn around and send it back is what you paid for the hide. So at that point, you paid as much in shipping. You spent $30 in shipping for a $15 hide, and you're out $30 and you have nothing. So I look and see like that. I want somebody to have different tiers of grade, and that they're specific on what they do. I want somebody that's been in business a long time. Like, I think if you're going to do this for any length of time, it bears like, I know the people that work at my local Tandy up in Columbus, and I could call them on the phone and this, and if it was Scott or somebody, he knows as much, if not more, than I ever will. So he could go through and he could pick me out. He's going to tell me that, you know, hey, we have a hide that met what I think your specifications are. I picked two that are one grade lower than that. I think that you can get what you want. Once you take a look at them or like that, or he'd tell me straight up. And it comes with a little bit of kind of networking and building contacts. If I was going to look through like a website, like I was going to go to eBay and I'm looking through, I want to see somebody that has definitive grades on what they do and actually give definition. Like, this is a premium hide. We charge more for it, but this has very, very limited amounts of scarring, of blemishes, and they'll phrase it that way. You'll pay more for that, but instead of wasting a bunch of time on postage, I would do that. If it's something like you can, before I would spend a bunch of money with somebody, I would get some test lots and see how they do. Like Tandy they had a bunch of this stuff that was bison leather. And I was like, you know, I would like to, haven't had much, this is buffalo. So I haven't had much chance to work with that. It works differently. I got some rhino stuff. This was, you can't legally buy unless it was something that has been grandfathered in. In other words, it was sold and was used before 1974, and you're buying something that's an existing thing, and it has to have some sort of history with it that can be proved like that, so you're not trafficking. Same thing for like walrus ivory and anything like that. So you're not going to find that stuff. But I got some years ago, and it's like this thick. It's, you know, half-inch thick. I tried to get different things to work with stuff. So I'll get, you know, rather than buy a bunch of fur-on rabbit skins to make a coat, because I'm going to need, let's say, 60 of them to make a whole, like if I'm doing a big long coat, I might need that many. Buy one and see what see what it is. See if you like work, like rabbit. I've worked some with rabbit fur. I made a hat for my wife and the band around it. Rabbit fur. It works differently. It's a lot more stretchy. It's more like deer in some ways, but it stretches and it tears really bad. So you can't use anything structural on it. Then there's a difference between hair-on hides, hides that have been tanned so they still have, and ones that have had the hair taken off. I can do a lot more things to if the hair's all, it's been dehaired, I can do more tanning. Certain things I can't do to a hair-on hide because it'll cause the hair to all fall out. Kind of like, I know that you're not supposed to, like if you color your hair, you're not supposed to leave the peroxide or whatever you're using on your hair too long. It'll cause it to fall out or cause bad problems. Kind of what it does to the leather. Other than that, test lots, see if they've got different things, see if they've got a money back guarantee, see if there's a line that you can call and talk to somebody. I a lot whether I think that you're legit or not, and I think that's kind of what you're trying to determine, whether they're a legitimate business trying to provide you the best product for you for what you want as they can, or whether they're just trying to unload something. Am I getting that kind of right?
Yeah, so you've mentioned Tandy Leather multiple times. Do you feel like their prices are generally pretty, competitive or reasonable?
I think so. I mean, there's nothing wrong. Like they've got 2 or 3 decent programs that, and I would use all of them. Like I get a catalog. You can get it online or you can get it in print. But they have specials. Like they'll have manager specials. Like somewhere around here. See how that looks real silvery? That's because it is. They were running, Tandy was running, like I went in there to get some, I don't know, lace, or I think I was getting Latigo lace like this. And they'll have stuff that's on sale. Okay, I wouldn't spend $100 for that, but I can play with it. I got a whole hide and it's bonded leather. What they've taken was they've skipped it down to real low and they've bonded like a real shiny metallic-y looking thing. So I thought, well, I've got a leather coronet, is what I like. But I could make one that instead of having to dye it silver, it has the silver and it's almost kind of a mirror. So I can play with that. But generally speaking, I mean, it's like anything else. Like you can go in Tandy and you can spend a fortune. Are they the cheapest on everything all the time? No, but no place is. Like if you can go to Weaver, like I personally would order stuff from them, but it's a good go. You can look around and see if they stuff. They're similar to Tandy, except for they don't have near as much of a online presence, and they don't have stores like there must be. Like Ryan did a class for rum a while back. Ryan's a friend of mine, and I know that he knows stuff. But Ryan's up in he's in the western part of Canada. He works for Tandy, so I'll pick his brain because they're trying to sell a product just like anybody else is, but they'll give him training. They get new dyes in, they let him play, and he's honest. He'll tell you what he thinks of it. It's like, because even in stuff that Tandy sells, he'll say, well, I don't like this. I don't think it's a good product. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, I've had really good luck with Tandy, and you can go in and they are happy to work with you and show you how to do things. And
well, I mean, what might matter for me might not matter to the next person, And I guess if they don't sell enough of, like, I'm not a big fan of the EcoFlow. It's a water stain for staining that, because I think it's too subjective. I think it gives uneven results because it's water-based. So if you're staining wood, I know that certain woods stain well, certain woods don't stain well. If I was staining poplar, I'm going to use a pre-stain conditioner on the wood to do that. Well, leather works a lot like that. Certain things, if it's thicker, there's certain areas that are more porous and are going to accept stain better than others. So the water dye, I mean, people have had good stuff like with that. It depends on how you're using it and what you're using it. But what I want to use it for, I don't care for that. That you can get feeblings. That's what I've stuck with. You can do all kinds of things, and just because I'm like, I don't think I guess there are bad products. I just think that there are more like, I don't like this product. It's not suitable for what I do or how I do it. That doesn't necessarily, in my mind, make it bad. It just makes it not suitable for me. Somebody who does things a different way might be super happy with it. But generally speaking, I think that always comparison shop, always price shop and see what you can get. Make sales, see what that, like they'll send you things that are, once they know what you like and stuff. Hey, by the way, we're having, like, I know you get, you like veg tan stuff and you do this. We got a bunch of this in that came from Mexico or there's a lot of veg tan stuff that comes from South America, like Rio and places like that. And it's pretty good quality. I haven't had an issue with that. And it's reasonable. Like, you can pay $200. If I want to get something from Italy that's pit tan and this, that cost me $400 for that. Depends on whether that's that important to you. I mean, I guarantee that Tandy has no pit tan leather, period. They're not going to carry it. It's too expensive. It's too niche for them. They'll have a wide range of stuff. You can generally get samples there. like a smaller thing. If, like you can get the big quartz, or you can get a pint, or you can get a little bitty, you know, like kind of like the tester's paint, little versions of that. You can get a little of that if you want to try something and see what it works out. I've tried things I like, some things I didn't. It just depends. Weaver offers a different things. Both of them do videos and stuff like that. I deal with them, and there's some other. I noticed the guy he's always at Penzic, and I'm trying to think what his name is. The far side of the road, like where the Cooper store is, it's like Green Mountain Leather, and I bought leather and stuff from him. And there's the guys down by the Penzic Independent paper that have all the horns and stuff like that, and they have some leather stuff too. Most of those guys are buying stuff up for what they know that's their market, and they're getting a big quantity to bring in there, and they can afford to sell it cheaper. So I'll get stuff at Penzic. There's stuff that I get from Tandy. There's stuff that I get from 2 or 3 different places. It depends on, like I was looking for, it's not leather, I was looking for ox horn, that I wanted some actual ox horn. I couldn't find any in the United States. That I had to go to Russia to find some, and they wanted an arm and a leg horn. You know, and it's not that important for me. I'll use buffalo horn, which is a reasonable substitute. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, that was helpful. Thanks.
I'll drone on. My wife said, yeah.
Quick question, going back to the oils used, would linseed oil be period appropriate, and would that work?
Or just, are you getting something that's already been oil tanned, or are you just wanting to treat?
We are going to try tanning our own stuff, so it has not yet been tanned.
I would test some first, having not experimented with using like, you know, oil, linseed oil is flax oil. So they use that for a variety of stuff. We know that that it was cultivated, it was available. If people had linen fibers, then they certainly could have had that. We know that that was used a lot on woodworking. I'm just not sure that that's, most of the oils I'm thinking of that they're using are fat oils, as opposed to like linseed oil or boiled linseed oil. Like if you're using it on, it'll spontaneously combust, or it can. It's very, very flammable. And that would concern me a little bit on whether I wanted to use that. I don't want to make something that's going to be dangerous. We didn't really cover that, but most people knows what buckskin are. So buckskinning, that's kind of brain tanning. That's a form of oil tanning. It's used more in what I would consider trapper stuff or colonial reenactment than it is more SCA. But pretty much every animal has enough brain matter in him that if you do that, it comes with enough to tan its own hide. And that's how you do that. And it gets that supple sort of chamois look to it. It has a little bit of stretch, but it's very good. You take and you scrape and scrape and scrape, and then they're putting this, well, that'll work. So I'm not saying that I'm just saying that there's a couple things that concern me with that. Like I would take some stuff, like you can take your hide, and I cut a little piece of it off, and then I roll the rest of it up, and I put it in a freezer, because that'll keep it from decaying, because you're refrigerating it. So I put it in a freezer. It's no different. And then you can experiment with this little piece, and you see what it does. And if it does okay, then feel free to the bigger section or the whole hide. You know, we're kind of like, it's not that different from food preservation in some ways. Like when I was a kid, we would smoke stuff. Like we had hams and things like that. We always, you can sugar cure ham, you can salt cure ham, you can smoke it. All of those are sort of desiccants, and they're preservatives. If I sugar cure things like Has anybody ever seen like an old, if you have hams hanging out in the smokehouse, if you leave them out there long enough, they get mold and stuff on the end. And then I've seen like the old timers, they would take and just cut that off and go right on and eat it, and it's no big deal. Anything that's a desiccant that'll suck the moisture out, because really what's causing the hide to decay, it's got moisture in it. If it's got moisture, liquid in it, then there's going to be biological processes that occur just like with everything and cause it to decay. You can get all the moisture out. You're doing the same thing as rawhide. You don't want to make it in rawhide because you want to be a little that, so you can do some of both. But if you're pulling the water out, but you're replacing it with oils, I would think, in theory, you could use lard, Crisco. But if you actually had real rendered lard, you could use that. But like lard or any of those things will go bad. Like if you have olive oil and stuff like that, everything will go rancid if it's long enough. So I would experiment some, and then check back with me. I'll do some checking. I'll know a couple of people to ask who've done more than I ever would have thought about. That would, and I would see what they say. And if they say, "Nah, I probably wouldn't do that," then I wouldn't. But there are some concerns just off the bat that I can think of, other than that's not the first oil that would come to my mind. I would get a rendered oil. Like the first thing that come to my mind would be seal oil, mink oil, or something like that. Like mink oil, or you can get those little cans that come with shoe polish. You can, I think Walmart still carries mink oil, and it's not all mink oil. It's some of it's oil, but it's got a lot of waxes and emollients and stuff in it. Like I would use some beeswax and mix it with that. If you're going to use the linseed oil, and there's a difference between linseed oil and boiled linseed oil as to how it works and stuff like that. But I'd take some regular linseed oil. I'd take some beeswax. I'd probably cut it 3 parts beeswax, part oil, and mix it up, and you're going to get a sort of a paste. And try that and see how it does. And to know long term, like you might have to try it and leave the rest of the hide in your refrigerator or freezer. You have a downstairs freezer, leave it in there for 6 months, because you're going to want to see how it does long term, how it does in the heat, and play around with it some. Does that help at all?
Yes, thank you. The project we're working on is attempting to taw a couple of hides for Viking sleeping skins. So we have a deer hide that somebody gave us, and an Icelandic sheep hide that somebody gave us. And so we've salted them over the winter and worked on flushing them, but we haven't yet.
Scraped them yet? Are they scraped? Did they come pre-scraped, or have you scraped them?
No, we've been flushing and scraping them. And we ended up salting them before flushing them just because of time crunch. So now that we are to the flushing portion of it and scraping, it's definitely more labor intensive because things are drier, but it seems to get a lot off.
Well, that and the salt was acting as a preservative, so it preserved the hide, but it also fatty layer on the inside, so it's keeping it there. Like normally what you can do, and it may not be too late to do that even, but if I wanted to get the hair and stuff off, I soak it in a solution, but I'm submerging it and soaking it in there for 3 days, so the outer hair will start to slip and it'll come off easier, but so will the inside. Then I can take a scraper and get some of that off easier.
The reason we hadn't done the submerging method was because we actually want to do tawing rather than tanning, so we want to keep the hair on.
Yeah, you can't do that if you're going to do that. Okay, the people that do a lot of that, like you still have Inuits that will still make native clothing, and they're doing a lot of that. I don't think there's anything to do, but like I'd get me a good stretcher, stretch it and work it. And I know that the Inuits are putting saliva, like they're putting spit back into it that helps it kind of chewing on it a little bit, and it helps it make it soft. You're breaking down some of the stiffness of the material, but your saliva also acts as a catalyst. And I know some people think that that's just a chemical reaction. I mean, you know, to me, it's not gross, and it certainly hasn't killed them for generations and generations of use. But I would stretch it out, and it gives you a better frame to scrape. Because I mean, yeah, it requires a lot of force and a lot of finger strength.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. We have any other questions? We're at about an hour. All right, I appreciate everybody for showing up. Hopefully you got something out of it. You guys can go on, like I've got a Middle Wiki thing that's got my email and stuff like that. If you have any questions or you want to know something, feel free. I'll be glad to help you anytime I can. Thank you so much.